Are you still basking in the afterglow of Ange Postecoglou's statement away victory against the self-proclaimed biggest club in the world? Have all of your Manchester United supporting friends and family gone surprisingly quiet on WhatsApp? These are the days to enjoy, Spurs fans, and hopefully I can help the enjoyment of your Monday as I go through the things I felt I learned from yesterday's demolition against Manchester United and bring you some of the quotes and thoughts from the Spurs players and manager after what was undoubtedly Big Ange's best day as boss. Also, a little bit of news about some huge investment that might well be coming into the club very soon. All this and more on today's episode of the Spurred On podcast. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. Do please press that like button. Do press subscribe in the bottom right hand corner if you're not already a subscriber to the channel. I bring you daily Spurs news and transfer content from around the Premier League, and you can listen on the podcast platforms as well, be that Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Just go there, type in the Spurred On podcast, give me a subscribe or follow. But of course, we have to start at Old Trafford from yesterday. I don't know about you guys, but it's just always so good when on a Sunday night after a big victory, I can watch Match of the Day 2, all the highlights on YouTube from the different channels, all the content creators, and of course, when you beat a club as big as Manchester United, where really the memeing of the influencers is absolutely top notch. There was just so many great clips of content from the different Manchester United fan channels of their supporters going absolutely crazy. But I do think there was a little bit where not enough of the media gave credit where it was due to Tottenham for their performance, for their absolute suffocation of Manchester United yesterday. It started in the first minute and we never let it drop. And that is why we went 1-0 up so early, as well as, of course, because of Mickey van der Ven's unbelievable talent matched with serious pace. But also why Bruno Fernandes was frustrated into making a silly challenge. Now, on Sky Sports today, and a lot of the clips are all saying, oh, it wasn't a red card, and Dermot Gallagher on Sky Sports today said he doesn't think it was a red card. But the reality is, he was so suffocated and frustrated in that first half and so unable to get a foothold in the game, either him or his teammates, and don't forget he was the captain, that he did stick out a leg in frustration, and that leg was too high. And there is an argument to wonder whether there was intent to hurt the player, but I don't think intent to hurt the player is what is in the rule book. Was he reckless? Was he out of control? Was he high? Yes, he was. So that's my argument to that. But, doesn't really matter. I think we would have, I think there's an argument to say we might have beaten them even, scored even more goals against them if they'd had 11 men on the pitch, because they had to play a bit tighter and more narrow in the second half. They weren't very good at it, but they probably would have come at us even more if they'd had 11 men on the pitch, and I think we would have turned them over even more easily. Anyway, in terms of the things that I really learned from yesterday, I wanted to start by talking about Ange has to get some credit for the way he's rotating players at the moment. And the reason why I feel like I want to talk about the credit that he deserves is because I was one of the first, maybe not the first, but one of many who really jumped in on Ange Postecoglou for the team that he picked against Coventry. And that was just over a week ago. It wasn't even that long ago. But the reality is, since then, he has really kind of chopped and changed his 11 so well. And that, I think, is what enabled us yesterday at a game as big as against Manchester United at Old Trafford to have the stamina to suffocate them for as much as I'd say 65, 70 minutes. We were absolutely top whack in terms of our high pressing, in terms of just pushing them into mistake after mistake after mistake. Can you remember, I think in even the first 5-10 minutes of the whole game, the Manchester United players kicked it out of touch while trying to find pretty simple passes, maybe as many as 3 times. And that's because Spurs were pressing from all angles. And that is because Ange Postecoglou has chopped and changed his team, brought in players where needed for different games, and that enabled us to have that stamina and fitness really for as much as 65, 70 minutes of that game yesterday. So that was very impressive, and credit where credit's due to Ange Postecoglou, because like I said, I did jump on his back a little bit for the team he picked against Coventry and for that performance, which I felt was a result of just all those players not having played enough games at all, and therefore there was no rhythm to any of them. And then throwing them all in together meant there was no rhythm to the performance whatsoever. However, maybe Ange Postecoglou, if you're going to ask him today, he would say, well, unless I'd thrown them all in that game, then none of them would have been able to have any rhythm in their legs for when they came in against Qarabag, for instance, or when they've kind of been chopped and changed a little bit for the Premier League game. So there's an argument on both sides, but I wanted to raise it. The next point I wanted to talk about in terms of something I learned is just... even though we put 3 past Man United at Old Trafford, we can still be so much more clinical. And if we hit our straps in a game where we take all of our chances or a lot of our chances, we will put 9 past someone. In the last few years, I think Southampton have had 9 hit past them a couple of times. Is there a game where maybe Liverpool have scored 8 or 9? It does happen in the Premier League these days, and it just needs almost like the perfect storm where we play against a team who maybe come at us a little bit from early in the game, concede an early goal or 2, and then maybe they're not kind of able to or willing to play for their manager to try and sit in. And I think there will come a time in this season, and maybe even quite soon, where we will stick so many goals past someone and have that huge kind of statement and win, not just in terms of the team they play against, but in terms of the huge result and how it'll affect our goal difference. Next, I wanted to talk about the midfield partnership. Mentioned quite a lot about Ange's bravery in picking both James Maddison and Decky Kulusevski as 2 creators in those 8-10 roles. And I think now it's here to stay, and it has to be here to stay. And I'm all for it now. I know there was at the beginning of the season, there was stick going Ange Postecoglou's way because they felt he was too forward-thinking, and the way that he reacted to it was to bring in Kulusevski to play with Maddison in central midfield. And I think now we can't change it. Obviously, he will move it around. Certainly against Ferencvaros, I don't imagine either of them will start the game. But in these big games, these big Premier League games, it works, and it's so hard for the opposition to defend against. Just the little 1-2s, the little triangles they play with Rodrigo Bentancur as well, between the 3 of them. So good. And doesn't it just feel like such a far cry from only last season when there were so many players in our squad who would come into the team either as starters or off the bench, and so many of those players where you're like, they are not technically good enough to play this style of football. And Ange Postecoglou, you've got to give him credit, because it's like for years, often we've been playing, those of us who play kind of FIFA or FC 25, whatever you call it, or Football Manager. And you're like, there are so many players in this real-life Spurs team that you would have to bomb out straight away because if I wanted to play a kind of progressive, passing, quick tempo, forward-thinking game, you can't have players on the pitch like Pierre-Emile Højbjerg or Emerson Royal. Good guys, good players, but they can't do it. And Ange Postecoglou saw it, he knows the kind of football he wants to play, and he was ruthless about it. And you've got to give him the credit for that. But now what we have is players in midfield especially, and all over the pitch actually, who are all technically gifted enough to take the ball on the half-turn, some better than others, I will say that, but all technically gifted enough to take it on the half-turn when they're pressed by opposition, when they have opposition players really near them, and still find one-touch balls or balls around the corner, or take a touch on it and lay it back and then make another movement. And honestly, it's so easy to get sucked into are the results good enough? Have we had a good enough start? And Ange should lose his job if not. But the reality is, the style of the football and the ability of the footballers to play Ange Postecoglou's style is now there, and even coming off the bench, it's also now there, and it's very, very exciting. And I think the key to that, or the key example of that, is Bentancur. It's Decky Kulusevski and it's James Maddison, and the way the 3 of them play amongst each other. Add in there, of course, Udogie and Porro, who are kind of in and around that area as well. And what has also really helped that, and helped that ability for us to play Kulusevski in that 8 and 10 role, is how Brennan Johnson is coming to the fore. And I feel like the Spurs players around him now know the positions to get him in. They know the positions where he is lethal, and that is in that little inside right channel, getting into the box, shooting into the bottom left-hand corner, and of course getting in at the back post from crosses in a similar way, exactly how we saw from the Mickey van der Ven run for the opening goal. So just absolutely loving the 3 in midfield. I think Basuma will of course start against Ferencvaros on Thursday night, and that will get some rhythm into his legs, which is good because he's had a little bit of a knock recently, hasn't he? And then we just have to wait and see what happens to Bentancur with his potential suspension. Maybe a few games out of the picture won't do him the biggest amount of harm, because he has obviously had a few big injuries in the last couple of years. I'm looking for positives here, but I'm really impressed with how he's playing in that kind of lone six role. Just his energy and his getting about the pitch and his reading the game and his scanning and his little passes in and around his teammates. But yeah, very impressed with all three of those midfielders. Now, wanted to talk a little bit about Timo Werner, and this might anger the fan base, and of course, feel free to get in the comments and tell me what you think. But I think, is there an argument to say, the morning after the night before, that actually Timo Werner played pretty well? If you take away the finishing, now of course, finishing is huge, he's a forward, but, well, yeah, it's huge, and you can't deny his finishing is bad. You can't deny the fact that when he runs through, we all know that he thinks he's not going to score, and that's why he's not scoring. He's not crisp enough with his shooting. He doesn't take it early enough a lot of the time. I would say the second one-on-one he had, where he tried to place it to Onana's left and bend it round into the far corner, actually wasn't a bad effort. He just didn't quite get enough on it to start it outside the line of the post, which he needed to do. But the difference between him and Sonny, when you see Sonny go through one of those one-on-one like that, you know that he is in the advantage position. You know that it's the keeper who thinks, I'm not going to save this, because Sonny knows, he looks up, picks his spot, and he crisply finishes it. So look, there's no doubt that Werner has no confidence, and we need him to get one of these goals, one of these times from a one-on-one, to get that confidence up. But when I say, is there an argument to say he played well? He made some unbelievable runs. His touch was really good yesterday compared to how it was against Coventry, certainly. And he really spread the play well. Like, he really kind of spread the pitch well for our players to get him in behind 3 or 4 times. And actually more times than we've got Sonny in any games recently at all. So there is an argument to say that his pace and his ability to time his run is really impressive. If I'm big Ange Postecoglou now, it's a bit of a difficult one. Certainly I would have Timo Werner out in finishing training with Sonny and have Sonny get in his ear and say, why don't you try something a bit different, or try this? But the other thing I would be saying if I'm big Ange Postecoglou is I'd be saying to the other players in the forward line, Dom Solanke and Brennan Johnson, if you see Werner making that run, you make the same run as well on the other side, because then when Werner's one-on-one, give him the option of just laying it simply across the box. There was one of them in the second half where he could potentially have done that, although there were defenders back. But if Johnson is up with him every time Werner goes through, and Johnson has the pace to do that, then it's easy for Werner to just slide an easy ball across to an open goal. Just a thought. Let me know in the comments what you think. I just don't want us to be too negative on Timo Werner, because I do think we will need him this season, and we want him at his most confident, and we need him to get a goal from a one-on-one for that to happen. Any kind of goal in the first part, but if we can get him a one-on-one goal, him to try something different, and maybe make the goalkeeper think twice about what he's going to do, because I think the goalkeepers at the moment, when they come up against Timo Werner, they know that if they make themselves big, they're more than likely to save it. So can Werner potentially try and add a taking it round the keeper into his armoury? Can he, like I said, lay it off to someone else, or try and take his shots even earlier somehow? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. I know a lot of people are anti-Timo Werner. They didn't want him signed in the first place, but I think the reality about playing Mikey Moore, and Mikey Moore, I'll go on to talk about, I think he will play against Ferencvaros, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I don't think you can expect someone like Mikey Moore to realistically play every game. And what a lot of you are kind of speaking about, I think, in terms of Werner, is drop him now, never see him in a Spurs shirt again, and play Mikey Moore every single game. He's too young for that. We need to bed him in slowly. We need to aid his development, not stunt his development by putting pressure on him at this point. The next thing I want to talk about was how the back line, I feel like the back four are now getting the credit that they fully deserve. And I feel like Destiny Udogi's role has been tweaked very slightly, and maybe that is because of the added creativity we have in midfield now, because we've got Kulusevski with Maddison, who realistically are not going to get back as quickly or as, let's say, strenuously as a Pat Matissar. I think Big Ange just said to Destiny Udogi, I don't want you to stop driving forward, but I need you to be a little bit narrower and a little bit more aware of what's happening on the way back in the transition, because we won't have as many legs coming back with Kulusevski and Maddison there. And Porro, Romero, Van de Ven and Udogi are now starting to get the credit they deserve, because they're keeping a few clean sheets. And even though, of course, we're still giving away chances, they are all absolutely unbelievable players in their positions, and it's just been, in the past year anyway, the reality that they weren't getting enough protection that meant that they were conceding so many goals. But now they all seem to be playing at the top of their level, and yeah, the pundits and the people in the media are starting to realise how incredible they are. I wanted to quickly mention Vicario's importance to yesterday's game, because it was only 1-0 when Xerxes had that chance from 6 yards out. He was on the stretch, and actually Vicario had to make a really important save there, and catching it so it didn't go out to a potential rebound was massive. They are the huge saves that you need to make at the absolute top level, because even though Spurs were completely on top, had the whole game in their hands, you give them just that one chance, they get that goal, and everything changes. The crowd are behind United, and Man United might then score another one very quickly, and it would become potentially a very familiar pattern and story to Old Trafford games from most of the years gone by. However, he makes that big save, and then the other thing that I want to talk about is he does seem like he's getting more on the front foot when coming out for crosses, when commanding his area. He knows what the issue is, and he's trying to deal with it, and I love that about him. And he's still young enough, Vicario, I think like 27, 28, where it will go in and he will improve at that. He will improve about his decision making as he gets used to the Premier League and the physicality of it and the tempo of it. And bear in mind, he's still only 14, 15 months into his Premier League career. As he gets more experience in it, more games, he will know how to read when it's time to come and when it's time to stay. And I'm already seeing little examples of his improvements on that. The other thing I just wanted to talk about in terms of things I learned, and I mentioned Mikey Moore before, this is something I mentioned after the Carabao game, but I saw it again last night. Just his balance on the ball, and he's actually quicker than I gave him credit for. I think he's being played on the left to kind of start his first team career so that he's not put in too many pressurised situations in the middle of the pitch. But yeah, there was just one run, wasn't there, on the outside when I really thought it was Diallo, I think, coming back at him, who's one of the quickest players in the Premier League, and he couldn't get near Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore was kind of at the same pace as Diallo, and I just love his balance. He's just got a really nice, kind of smooth way about him. And let me know in the comments, guys, how much did you go up and almost like scream when he had that shot and it looked from the angle that the camera was at like it might just nestle in the top corner? That would have been one of the moments to remember for all Spurs fans for many, many years. And I love the fact that he was confident enough to take that on. Drop of the shoulder, take it inside, try and hit it into that far corner. It wasn't far off, and long may it continue. Like I said, I think he'll start against Ferencvaros, and really excited to see how he does in what will be a difficult away game over in Hungary with, probably a mix and match of first team players and the players who've been on the bench more recently. Just a few quotes from after the game. On Destiny Udogie's injury, Ange Postecoglou said that he was feeling okay after the initial moment when he got injured in the first half, but that he wants to protect his players, and he felt that this was a moment where the precaution was sensible to take. I agree. I was saying it at the time when I was doing the watch along on We Are Tottenham TV, and I feel like that's something hopefully we've learnt from earlier in the season with Mickey van der Ven, where we didn't maybe take him off when we should have done, and it meant that he missed a couple of games. I also was very impressed with Jed Spence. He's another one who looks totally at one when it comes to coming onto the pitch for Spurs at the moment, understands the system, certainly in terms of going forward, makes really good runs, and I like the little partnership he formed, albeit for a short amount of time, with Mikey Moore on the left there. Ange was also asked about Dominic Solanke getting another goal. He said Dom's overcome his supposed crisis of confidence that lasted 180 minutes or so, and he's leading the line well. That term, leading the line well, absolutely. He's doing unbelievable doggy work off the ball as a number 9, pressing and pressing and pressing, and then his hold-up play, his back-to-goal play, his link play, bringing other players in, absolutely loving it. And I think at the moment, for me, he's looking like the real deal for Tottenham Hotspur, and a very impressive buy. Little stat, Spurs registered 4.67 expected goals against Manchester United yesterday, which is the most that Tottenham have ever had in a single Premier League game on record. Like I said, it was a demolition. We should have scored more, and there's much more to come. Somebody is going to get an absolute pounding from us sometime soon. Decky Kulusevski was talking afterwards about Tottenham's direction going forward. He said that's how we need to play. Our season started now. 4 wins in a row. The feeling is very good. A lot of happy players, and it's showing on the pitch. That's talking about confidence, isn't it? And the importance of getting confidence into all the players so they can play the way they want to. Doesn't it feel now like that performance in the last few games, certainly since Coventry, have felt like so much closer to the way we were playing those first 10 games last season? Just that intricate stuff in central midfield. I really remember from those early days last season where Udogie was mixing with back then Maddison and Sarr and Basuma. And Spurs are now getting it in with Maddison and Kulusevski and Bentancur, but with those players, Basuma and Sarr and Archie Gray and Bergvall still to come in. All those players technically proficient, able to play the style. Really exciting. Kulusevski went on to talk about how he's now playing as a midfielder in that 8-10 role. He said, "This is my position. I grew a lot because now I can defend. Before, maybe I didn't defend as much, and that's why I didn't play in central midfield. But now I'm growing as a player, and now I can play to my strengths. I'm best in the middle. I can score goals. I can find good passes. I play with Maddison, who's unbelievable with the ball. We have Rodrigo Bentancur, who when he plays like this is an unbelievable player. So it looks offensive on paper, but right now it's working really well." Well, I think Decky has hit the nail on the head there, hasn't he? He's saying exactly the kind of things that I'm saying. He sees it the same way that the fans are seeing it, and he's confident. A lot of people have been saying, I think Jory actually said it on when he called into We Are Tottenham TV yesterday, and a friend of mine texted me about it as well, that Decky is starting to give off slight Zlatan vibes in terms of his confidence and an almost like arrogance in terms of how he plays the game and talks about his abilities, and I love that for him. And let's not forget, and feel free to get in the comments, those of you who are doing this. Back in the summer, lots of people saying, "Oh, Kulusevski's never going to make it. He's not good enough." I never said that. I always said, at the very worst, Kulusevski makes an unbelievable squad player. But now we've seen him get a run in his actual natural position of 8 or 10. The strength that he was showing yesterday, Manchester United players just bouncing off him left, right and centre, and then his ability to pick the right pass and get in the right position, and still sometimes crop up on the right-hand side as well, and show more pace than he's shown for a long time, I thought, as well, when he was driving outside his full-back, winning free kicks. Really exciting times for Spurs to have players like Kulusevski and Maddison playing together. Meanwhile, some update on Son Heung-min's injury. The South Korean manager has said that while Sonny is recovering well, he himself and Spurs believe that he's not quite fit to play as of yet. He's been named in the Korean national team for the international break. However, the situation, whether he's able to return to action at club level this week, will be monitored to see if he is then available for South Korea. Interesting one this, isn't it? Because obviously we'd like Sonny to be fit for our next game against Brighton next weekend, but also what we don't want to do is overload him and play him against Brighton and then he go off for South Korea and then get an injury having travelled and not recovered well enough. So I just want them to be very careful with him and make sure that he's really, really fit. And then just the final bit of news, as I mentioned in the title, according to the Daily Mirror, former Newcastle chairman and the people who put together their buyout from the public investment funds of Saudi Arabia, Amanda Staveley and her husband, Mehrdad Gadusi, they are now expected to buy some of Joe Lewis's shares at Tottenham by the end of the year, with one source telling the Daily Mirror that Amanda is serious about being involved with Spurs and is hoping that an initial purchase can be completed within weeks. They both apparently hope that improved funding from the Middle East could help Spurs get Spurs challenging at the top of the Premier League table, with trophies also, of course, sought after in North London. However, the Mirror goes on to report that the shares will not come cheap. Deloitte's 2024 report indicates that Spurs are 8th in the Worldwide Money League, making them worth at least £2.6 billion. So Staveley's investment, if she's going to make it, will have to far outweigh the initial one put into Newcastle just 3 years ago. Let me know in the comments what you feel about this. I'm very torn about it. Of course, I want Tottenham to have the financial muscle to start paying the wages and the transfer fees for the players that can only really at the moment go to the clubs who pay more than us. Of course I want that, but I'm a little torn about Middle Eastern investment in general. Certainly if it comes from kind of a state, I don't want that to be the case as it was for Saudi Arabia with Newcastle. However, Daniel Levy has been very open for a number of years now, a year or two anyway, about how he needs more capital in the club, more base capital. And maybe this is a way for Tottenham to unlock the reality that they can spend a lot of money if they have that money in the coffers. Whereas at the moment, we do not have the capital, we just have the ability to spend that in terms of not breaking the profit and sustainability rules because of the huge revenue that we generate, especially through the stadium. So let me know in the comments what you think about it. I'm a little bit torn, but also I do want to compete at the top table, so I understand it could be huge for us, but it's a bit of a difficult one to get behind without knowing who those people investing in us would really be, because it's not Staveley and her husband. It's Staveley and her husband fronting what will be a consortium where the money is coming from probably slightly invisible places. And I, for one, would want to know where that money is coming from. Anyway, guys, enjoy the rest of your Monday. Thank you so much for watching. Once again, please do press like. Please do subscribe. It's just in the bottom right-hand corner there where you see a little picture of my illustrated face. Press that subscribe button for daily Spurs content and Premier League transfer news. Yeah, like I said, just enjoy your Monday. And what a time to be a Spurs fan. Come on, you Spurs.